You're listening to Permission To, the podcast where we dive into the science and soul of owning your worthiness as a perfectly imperfect human being. I'm your host, Sam Dew, psychotherapist, positive psychology coach, mama to a beautiful 5-year-old Amelie, and passionate advocate for living an inspired life. My aim is to show you that you have full permission to own your worthiness so that you can embrace your true nature and begin walking boldly toward your dreams. Let's dive in. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Permission To. This is a really short and sweet episode. I am literally trying to be less perfect, and not that my podcasts have ever been perfect, but just to not overthink episodes and to just fit them in when I can, so that I can get them to you more often. So I think I've got about 7 minutes to get this one done. So let's dive in. This episode is permission to learn how to change your habits and create new habits, but in a way that is sustainable. And so essentially this episode is really called How I Quit Coffee. And this is not going to be one of those episodes where I'm going to talk to you about the health benefits or, kind of give you advice on why you should quit coffee, because as you'll hear from me, I think that's a very personal choice and it really comes down to you and why you would be quitting coffee. But I was thinking about how I quit coffee, I would say about 3 years ago, and how it's actually was one of the easiest habits to stop. And I created a new habit. I now drink chai lattes. So still some caffeine. I still have a little bit of caffeine every day, but I don't have any coffee and haven't had coffee for about 3 years. I still miss the smell of coffee, and so I sometimes also do have a decaf. I still love going to cafes, catching up with friends, and love coffee culture and cafe culture. It's a really big part of living in Australia and the part of the world that I live in. But yeah, I was able to quit the habit of drinking coffee and replace it with a new habit, which felt better for me. So I'll just explain to you why I quit coffee. So I used to just drink coffee on the weekends, and then I became a mum almost 7 years ago. Amelie's turning 7 really soon. And I think the sleep deprivation just really shocked me. And I went from having a coffee as a treat on the weekend to having 2 coffees a day. So I'd wake up and I'd have a coffee quite early in the morning, and then I'd have an energy crash in the afternoon and have a second coffee. And you know what? For some people, having 2 coffees a day feels really great for them. And, there's that lovely buzz that you get from having coffee, and, there's so many great things about coffee. But for me, I'm a highly sensitive person. I've got a bit of a history of struggling with anxiety, and I'm someone who's definitely kind of quite prone to anxiety. And so having 2 coffees a day was not serving me well. And something I've also learned since having my second bub, and so I've had Frankie with no coffee in my life, is that sometimes having extra coffee kind of masks how tired we are. And so it also created this pattern for me of when Amelie was napping, my first bub, instead of resting, when I needed to rest, I would be doing things because I wasn't listening to my body. I was just fueling it with more and more coffee. So anyway, that is why I quit coffee. Basically, I knew that it wasn't good for me. And the reason that it was so easy is because I did it in a really gentle way. So I was working with a naturopath and a chiropractor at the time. And my chiropractor said to me, okay, the first thing to do is to move your first coffee from 7 or 8 a.m. to 9, 10 a.m. so that you're not having coffee straight away. So I did that. I took a couple of months to get used to that. And then I dropped down from 2 coffees to 1 coffee, and then eventually from 1 coffee to no coffees. And the reason I'm sharing this, because I've noticed around the New Year period that people put so much pressure on themselves around starting new habits, but they expect themselves to go from 0 to 100. So if I had gone, right, I'm having 2 coffees a day, shame on you, Sam, you shouldn't be drinking any coffee. That's how so many of us talk to ourselves when we're going to try and change habits, which isn't helpful either. If I'd said that to myself and gone, no coffee, and just completely tried to go from 2 coffees a day to 0 coffees a day, probably what would have happened is that it would have overwhelmed me. It would have been too much change too quickly, and I would have given it up and just ended up still having those 2 coffees a day. But because I did it slowly and gradually, I would say that I actually took around 6 months to make that whole transition, maybe even longer than 6 months. So because I did it step by step, it was really gentle on my nervous system. It didn't overwhelm me. And it also, I guess it just made it sustainable. And it let me figure out who I needed to be as a non-coffee drinker as well. So then that's when I discovered that I really enjoyed a chai. Like I really love a sticky chai, none of that powdery sweet stuff. And I love a soy or an almond chai. This is making me really want a chai. And so I created a new habit to kind of replace the other habit. So this is just like such a short, simple episode, but I really want you to understand these lessons about how I quit coffee. So the first lesson is start small. Don't overwhelm your nervous system. Don't beat yourself up, and don't criticize yourself for where you're at now. And then secondly, and also really importantly, know why you want to start a new habit or know why you want to stop a habit. So for example, if you just went and said, I've got to quit coffee because everyone's doing it and coffee's really bad for you, then it's probably, you're not going to be so intrinsically motivated to quit coffee as if you actually understand why. So for me, my why was because, hey, I'm pretty sensitive to caffeine. It makes me feel quite anxious and stressed. And I want to slow down and be calm and content and for my nervous system to just feel nourished and supported. And so that was my why. I was also having a bit of postpartum anxiety, and I was quite conscious of that, like rubbing off on my daughter, and so that she was my other why, I guess. So the second part of creating habits is really understanding why you're doing it, and it needs to be your why, not somebody else's. So that's it. I am going to come back with a follow-up on some more kind of information about habits and how you can start habits and how you can stop habits, all based on James Cleary's book on habits, which is really, really impactful. But I just wanted to share this part with you for now. Hope you're having a beautiful day. I'd love to hear from you if there's a habit that you want to stop or a habit that you want to start in 2023. And if there's any way that I can support you with that, if there's any content that you want me to create around that, I would be so happy to do that for you. I will see you in the next episode. Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of how I quit coffee, or permission to create habits that feel good for you. So I wanted to follow up the first part of the episode with actually kind of how you can create habits. And I just wanted to acknowledge that a lot of this is based on James Clear, Atomic Habits, which I know many of you will have read and loved, but I also know there'll probably be people who haven't read it or don't know about it, or even if you have read it, it's quite helpful to revisit these principles. So what I really, really love about Atomic Habits is it's probably a bit similar to my take on procrastination. Like I feel like people beat themselves up for procrastinating. People beat themselves up for not being able to create the habits that they want to create or stop the habits that they want to stop. But like as James says, we haven't actually been taught how to create good habits. It's not something that we're taught at school. And honestly, I believe learning how to create habits should be taught at school just as much as maths and English and all those other things that we're taught are taught. Like I really think that learning how to work with your inner world is such an important tool for life. And what I would say, I'm going to quote a section of the book here. You can think of each law as a lever that influences human behavior. So when the levers are in the right positions, creating good habits is effortless. When they are in the wrong positions, it's nearly impossible. So if you think back to a time when you have created a new habit or stopped an old habit, and it felt really effortless, when I go through these different kind of laws that James describes, you might be able to recognize some of them in the way that you went about doing that. Or if you've always found that creating new habits is really, really hard, then you might be able to kind of experiment with using some of these laws. So yeah, shout out to James Clear. This book, Atomic Habits, is really, really fantastic book. If you haven't read it, definitely recommend it. So in a nutshell, when you want to change your behavior, which is what we're doing when we create habits, you simply want to ask yourself, how can I make it obvious? How can I make it attractive? How can I make it easy? And how can I make it satisfying? And I'm going to use a different example because you might be getting a bit sick of hearing me talk about coffee. So I'm going to talk about how I created a habit of going to a 6 a.m. Pilates class, as someone who has always had a lot of resistance to exercise, gyms, things like that, and always found it really, really hard. And full disclosure, I haven't been this is a habit that I created when Amelie was younger, before Frankie was born. I am only just slowly starting to get back into morning Pilates this year. So full disclosure, this is like an old habit. Obviously getting pregnant and having a baby changed that. And I guess I want to be honest about that and model it and normalize it, that, hey, you're not a failure if you start this incredible new habit and you do it for a year or two and then your life changes and you have to start again. I think that as women, we shame ourselves so much for it. I have had this story with a few of my clients where it's there's no point starting because, something always comes up and then I stop. But actually starting, even if you do it for 6 months, that's still 6 months where you did do that habit that you weren't doing, the year before. So by modeling that, hey, I worked really hard on this habit of 6 a.m. Pilates when Amelie was a toddler. And then now that I've had a baby, I've stopped doing that habit. I really want to normalize and just model that it's okay to be kind to yourself when you do stop habits as well. So this is outside of the book. Just in general, don't be perfectionistic about creating and changing habits, because then you're going to create so much blocked energy, so much resistance, so much anxiety. If you can be really, really compassionate with yourself, or what I like to call unconditionally kind with yourself, then you are going to be much more in a position to create these habits and kind of roll with life, that lifes, and we can start a habit and then we get sick and sometimes it feels like we have to start again, and that's okay. So anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a detour from talking about the book. So how to create a good habit. The first law is make it obvious. The second law is make it attractive. The third law is make it easy. And the fourth law is make it satisfying. So, talk you through the Pilates example. The way that it made it obvious for me, it was a really, really handy thing with the Pilates that I was going to. It was not cheap, it was probably $20 to $30 for a class, because it was a reformer Pilates, and it always booked out. So I had to book it ahead of time and pay ahead of time, and there was consequences for not showing up, you'd lose your money, right? So that, for starters, made it really obvious to me. It was in my calendar, so it was in my Google Calendar. I've got 6 a.m. Pilates on a Friday morning. And then the other thing that for me that made it really obvious was I would actually get my sneakers and my leggings and whatever I was going to wear to the 6 a.m. Pilates and fold it up and put it by my bed, so that this is kind of making it obvious, but it's also making it easy. And there are certain things you can do that will cross across the laws. So for me, setting my alarm, for 5:30 so I could get there for a 6 a.m. and putting it in my calendar, and then getting my clothes out was really telling my brain, hey, tomorrow you're going to Pilates. Now, the way that I made it attractive was that I would often go with a friend, or I just made sure that I chose like an activity that I really love. Like, so when I wasn't doing Pilates, I was doing dance classes, and I wasn't trying to force myself to do exercise that I hated. I personally don't see what the point is. Like, life's short. There are many, many ways to move your body. So don't waste your time doing stuff that you absolutely hate. I know lots of people are going to disagree with me on that. But yeah, I always chose exercise, movement that I really love. So my dance classes, Pilates, I actually really enjoy that, especially if I'm with someone that I really connect with. And like, for me, this sounds maybe a little bit superficial, but I love going to Pilates in like a beautiful, beautiful environment. It just makes me feel like I've had a great start to the day. So I always try to choose a studio that's got like beautiful light and just feels great to be at. And then, yeah, the third law, make it easy. For me, making it easy, making it obvious are quite similar, but I guess like there are other ways you can make it easy. Like, don't go and book like a class that's like a 40-minute drive. If there's something that's like 5 minutes drive, that's going to be so much easier. Like, my dance school's like 7 minutes drive from me. I know not everyone will have that choice, but if you can, make it as easy as possible. And then the fourth law, make it satisfying. So for me, that's like, I go and I get like my beautiful chai. Sorry, here's me talking about chai again. I go and get my oat chai or my almond chai or whatever it is after Pilates, and that makes it feel really, really satisfying. And then when I get home, this is the other thing about habits. I can't remember if this is in the book or if this is just my like lived experience and also supporting my clients, but like really paying attention to the positive consequences after you do the class, because, and this is where procrastination comes into habits, right? Often before we exercise, we experience a lot of resistance, a lot of, oh, I don't really feel like going. I don't want to go. I know I won't enjoy it. We can have all those stories in our head, or I'm too tired. But afterwards, often, if you're doing exercise that you love and that generally makes you feel good, you feel great afterwards. So when the fourth law of making it satisfying, make sure you really like tune into how you feel. Like, what I notice is when I do 6 a.m. Pilates and then I come home to toddler life, mum life, business life, I always feel like I've already had a great day by like 7 a.m. if I've started the day off with my Pilates. And so I, find a way to really ground into that, to really pay attention to it and notice, like, even at lunchtime, I'd go to myself, oh gosh, I've got so much more energy today because I did Pilates. And so I like throughout the day, I would like be helping my brain find ways to remember how satisfying Pilates was. And then this is what in psychology we call like a positive maintenance cycle. So actually, you know, we've done the thing and we get the benefit of it, we feel good, and that makes us more likely to want to do it again. So that is how to create a good habit based on James Cleary. And the other thing I wanted to say, this is Mel Robbins. This is how my brain works. I've often got lots of different tools that I kind of mishmash together. Mel Robbins' 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rule, the 5-second rule, is also a game changer here. Because, and this is where I think like making it obvious, the first law, is really important. Because if you kind of say to yourself, oh, maybe I'm going to do some exercise tomorrow morning. I'll see how I feel tomorrow, like when I wake up. Chances are, unless you're a unicorn, let me know if you are, because I want your brain. But most of my clients that I support and my brain, if we had given ourselves that choice and we hadn't set ourselves up the night before and already told our brains what we were doing, we would find it quite hard, you know. And I know there are women out there who have these incredible morning routines, and maybe they can just do that. But I don't find it that easy. So Mel Robbins' 5-second rule is really powerful, because you've decided the night before you're going to Pilates, and then you don't give yourself more than 5 seconds to think about it. So what she says is go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Because it only takes 5 seconds for you to talk yourself out of doing something. And I've definitely noticed that's true. I'm sure everyone can relate to this. your alarm goes off at 5:30. You kind of think, should I go today? How am I feeling? If you spend 30 seconds thinking about that, it might be too late. You might have already decided you're not going to go. You roll back you can go to sleep. And then, half an hour later, you wake up and think, I wish I'd gone to Pilates and I've already been charged for it. So, I also really encourage you to play around with Mel's 5-second rule, and to really, use that. Like, don't give yourself time to change your mind. Just get up and go. And that's why, for me, having my gym clothes there was also really, really key. Having my water bottle. There are so many ways that my brain could decide to get out of something. Like, I couldn't find my sneakers. Or where's my water bottle? Oh, it's in the car. I don't really want to go get, it's really easy. Our brains, when we're trying to create a new habit, our brains can be very resistant to change, and they can just try and find any reason not to do it. So you've got to make it so easy, so obvious, and so attractive for your brain. So that is it for this episode. I'm playing around with whether I do another episode on how to break a bad habit, which is basically just reversing, use all the same principles we've talked about, but reversing it. But I feel like it would actually be nice to actually do an episode on that. I'll try and think of a bad habit that I've had that I, tried to break, and how I used James Cleary's method for that as well. But so just remember, whenever you want to change your behavior, create a good habit or break a bad habit, you need to ask yourself, how can I make it obvious? The first law. How can I make it attractive? The third is the second law. The third law, how can I make it easy? And fourth, how can I make it satisfying? And like with my coffee example, it's also okay to not go from 0 to 100, to start slowly and sustainably. And also really, really ground into your why. Know why you're trying to create this habit for yourself, or stop this other habit, and really ground into that, rather than just being influenced by other people and thinking, I should start doing this because other people are, or, I should stop doing this because everyone says that you should. It's really got to come from you. I think that makes such a big difference. So that is it for today's episode. At the moment, I'm actually starting to plan round 2 of Permission Granted for 2023. Looks like we are kicking off around August, and I am currently inviting people to join the waitlist, and even to have the opportunity to have a 30-minute connection call with me, so that you can ask me any questions about Permission Granted. It's an opportunity to be coached by me, and it's really a way that I want to honor and acknowledge that Permission Granted is it's a deep experience. There needs to be a lot of trust between myself and you for you to want to do that experience. It's a big commitment, 6 months, and we go really deep there. So I'm really recognizing that for some people, actually having more space to make that decision, having time to meet me, ask questions and things like that is really key. So we've got the waitlist link at the bottom of the podcast episode. If you join that waitlist, or just send me an email or a DM, I'll be in touch to invite you to have a little call with me. And as always, I would be super grateful if you are loving these episodes, if you could leave a 5-star review to help me just get this message out to as many people as possible. I will see you next week.